we are not done hating on Disney quite yet. Our next story brings us to the news about SpiderMan leaving Marvel's expanded universe due to the negotiations between Disney and Sony breaking down. And we've got two stories here that we're going to kind of cover on this, but let me read through this stuff and we'll get to your reactions. So headline, Spider-Man's exit from Marvel Studios explained, why it happened and who's to blame. This comes from Screen Rant from Mansoor Mithiwalaya. Sorry if I butchered that name, but you have a very weird name. Sony and Marvel Studios' deal to share Spider-Man is officially over, but what really happened and who is to blame for Spidey's exit from the Marvel Cinematic Universe? So for those of you who don't know, it came out a couple days ago that negotiations had broken down between Sony and Disney in the sense that Sony owns the movie rights to Spider-Man, and a while back they had come to some type of agreement to share the character where he would appear in the MCU in Disney's films, and he would appear in solo films that were produced solely by Sony. And Sony Pictures went through one trilogy and two additional Spider-Man movies before eventually agreeing to share the character with Marvel Studios. And for a while, it was great. Tom Holland joined the MCU as Peter Parker Spider-Man, and he starred in 5 movies, beginning with Captain America Civil War, culminating in Spider-Man Far From Home's release in July. Marvel Studios was riding high off of Avengers Endgame, record-breaking run at the box office, and Sony Pictures was ready to reap the rewards of their partnership. Sony and Marvel simply sharing Spider-Man wasn't the only major aspect of the landmark deal that they reached in 2015. While the fine print of that contract was never shared with the public, certain agreements and clauses have been well circulated. On the cover, Spider-Man would exist within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which meant that Marvel Studios was free to team up with the superhero and anyone they wanted to in practically any film they wanted him in. But they also had to develop solo movies under Sony. That started with Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man 3. Since Sony would be fronting the cost of production and marketing for all the solo Spider-Man films, they would also retain all the revenue generated from them. But at the time, Sony offered Disney 5% of first dollar grosses, which the Mouse House waived. I don't know why they would waive grosses on that, but who knows. However, it's not like Disney wasn't getting anything out of the deal besides using Spider-Man. Since they were spending the time to make the standalone movies, Disney and Marvel Studios were allowed to keep all the money from Spider-Man merchandise sales. For some of the characters, that might not mean much, but for Spider-Man, that's a gold mine. And if there's anything Disney is truly good at doing, it's selling merchandise from retailers, their own stores, and their theme parks. Overall, it was a fair deal for everyone involved. I'd like to point out that there are reports that Sony sold the merchandising rights back to Disney like a while ago, so I don't think that was part of the agreement, but that's kind of up in the air. Unfortunately, the Spider-Man partnership between Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios suddenly collapsed in August of 2019, mere days before Spider-Man Far From Home passed Skyfall to become Sony's new record holder. And while blame was immediately tossed around amongst the fans online, the real reasons why everything went awry boils down to business and money, which is very similar to Kevin Smith's theory that life is nothing but bitches and money. Sony wanted to continue the partnership as it was for the past 3 years, while Disney wanted more out of it, not just merchandising sales. With the MCU's Phase 4 developing several new characters, as well as Marvel's TV shows for Disney+, for the first time, Marvel Studio President Kevin Feige has his work cut out for him. And with Marvel regaining the movie rights to the X-Men and Fantastic Four as a result of Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox, there's even more for Feige and Marvel to handle at this time. So according to Sony's official statement on the matter, Feige simply couldn't continue to work on solo Spider-Man movies for Sony since they didn't own the IP. To solve this issue, Disney offered to split the production costs, but also take half of the box office of future Spider-Man movies, reportedly extending to Venom 2 and other spin-offs. So Disney was offering to basically co-finance all Marvel properties that Sony was looking to make. They'd cover 50% of the cost for 50% of the revenue. Sony rejected the offer. To them, they would rather take the chance of the next movie earning a little less than sharing the profit, because 100% of 800 million is more than 50% of 1 billion. And so Sony countered Disney's offer, but somewhere along the line, the Mouse House wouldn't budge. For Disney, not sharing in the profits means working on the films would have been a wasted time, and they incorrectly believed Sony needed them to survive. It's safe to say that the biggest blow from the Sony-Marvel deal breaking down is that Spider-Man will no longer be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they're basically dropping Spider-Man from the MCU. Tom Holland is still attached to Spider-Man 3 and Spider-Man 4 for Sony, which means that Sony plans on continuing the current live-action iteration of the Web-Slinger, though it might be without director John Watts. But in doing so, they will have to avoid all connections to the MCU. It's certainly doable, albeit tedious, for the writers narratively. Sony can adapt Kraven's Last Hunt and a bunch of other crap. At this point, Sony reportedly considered making Venom rated R, but since they hope to potentially cross over Venom with Spider-Man in the future, they made the film PG-13 to go along with the MCU's family-friendly tone. Now that the deal is over, Sony could move forward with an R-rated Venom 2, and still have Holland appear as Spider-Man. But for some reason, that's not something that they want to do anymore. Then evolving Spider-Man's story as well as his rogues gallery would be the next step, as would potentially doing more spin-offs. Now, in addition to this, I'm not going to read through this article, but I wanted to point out another Screen Rant article, this one by Molly Freeman. The headline is Dark Phoenix could be to blame for Spider-Man leaving Marvel. And basically, what this article says is that after Disney acquired X-Men and Fantastic Four, they basically have so much on their plate in terms of planning that they didn't want Kevin Feige focusing on Spider-Man and taking his attention away from this stuff because he's getting spread pretty thin. And it also kind of talks about how Alan Bergman, who was the Walt Disney Studios co-chairman, was kind of bullying Sony. He was throwing Disney's weight around trying to get these co-financing agreements to go forward. And Sony was like, oh, screw that. We don't need you guys. You've given us the template. We can do this ourselves now. So I'd highly recommend anyone interested in the Spider-Man Disney breakup, check out these two articles. But what I want to know now is, what do you guys think of this mess? Alex, what are your thoughts on the breakup between Sony and Disney?
I think it's a real shame for the fans. I think we're the only ones that are really losing in this right now, because Tom Holland in the MCU with the rest of those characters was a great addition, in my opinion. I think he really nailed that character in this universe. And being able to play off those other characters that we've been watching for 10 plus years, I think it was a great opportunity for them. So for this to fall apart is a real bummer for me because I was looking forward to seeing where he was going to go. They were kind of leaning towards setting him up as at least one of the main pillars of the Avengers, and that's not going to happen anymore. So I understand Sony's position, though. Disney was reaching into their pocket and trying to take more than what they had already been taking. So for them to have access to the merchandise plus 5% on the movie profits, in my opinion, sounded like a pretty dang good deal for Disney to be able to promote the rest of their characters to put them in a Spider-Man movie. So I understand Sony's position. I know why they did what they did. It's just a real bummer. And I hope that they can, at the very least, I hope that they can kind of salvage what's left and use Tom Holland to the fullest of his abilities and put him in their own Spider-Man universe. And I tweeted out the other day a poster, a fan-made poster of Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all dressed up as Spider-Man, like looking over the city. And I'm like, if you're going to do it, you better do it, because this is going to be a moneymaker. You have super fans of Tobey Maguire. You have people who loved Andrew Garfield, and you have people who love Tom Holland. You do like a Into the Spider-Verse style movie with those three characters, and I think that'll make a ton of money.
Mr. Vader, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a shame that they lost this iteration of Spider-Man. As far as I'm concerned, he's entrenched in the MCU now, and for him not to be able to interact with those characters that he's been with for the last 5 movies that they've had him in, right? 5 movies. it's a shame, and I just think it's a big jarring jolt to the character to have to be yanked from the MCU and thrown into whatever they do with him there in Sony, man. I mean, if it was me, I mean, I don't know if they can do this, but I would probably make a Miles Morales movie if I was Sony and let Peter Parker stay with the MCU and just develop a whole different kind of thing over there. But
well, I was one of the people who was initially surprised that this deal ever existed to begin with, because I mean, it's almost unprecedented to see two rival studios share a character, and the way that these guys did. So the fact that we ever got Spider-Man back in the MCU to begin with was a huge surprise.
To me, it's like it'd be like DC having Batman and Superman, but having Warner Brothers or Sony or somebody having Wonder Woman, and they're trying to make a Justice League movie. It'd be impossible, and it's just the whole thing's crazy to me. I've never liked it from the beginning. I didn't like it when all these companies bought all these different pieces of Marvel, and I understand why they did it at the time, but I think Spider-Man belongs with Marvel and Disney, and I think that's just I honestly wish Disney would just buy Sony at this point to get them all under one roof. But that's
I honestly think that this really came down to Kevin Feige, because I think he was doing a lot of work on these Spider-Man movies. I think he was kind of behind the scenes. He was very involved with Venom. And I think that because, they're Disney's, Marvel Studios people were so putting in so much work into these Sony movies and not getting anything out of it in terms of money, I think that was a big motivator for Disney to be like, hey, we need Feige to focus on our stuff. He's our golden boy. If you want him to continue with Spider-Man, you need to let us have a cut of these movies. And of course, Sony, they don't have a lot of big franchises at the moment. So Spider-Man is their biggest franchise. They didn't want to give up a cut of that. So I think that the article where it talks about how X-Men needing Kevin Feige's attention, and Disney wanted to pull him away from his duties on the Sony films to focus on that, I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think this also comes down to the first deal was negotiated between, I believe, Amy Pascal and Kevin Feige. And this one was negotiated by the new head of Sony, Tom Rothman, and Alan Horn, and this other guy, what's his name? Alan Bergman over at Disney. And so I think that you got the two hard-headed bosses trying to do these negotiations, and neither of them wanted to budge, and they both wanted to throw their weight around. I think that's one of the reasons why this thing kind of collapsed. But unfortunately, it looks like this isn't going to get resolved. We can expect Spider-Man to not show up in any future Marvel movies until
that's a shame.
They get the rights back, which at this point is dubious that they ever will, because as long as Sony puts out a new Spider-Man movie every 3 years, they'll be able to hold on to those rights, unfortunately. So let's look at some comments here. Mladen Kulik says, Sony won the battle, yay. I don't know if I can root for either studio in this, because I think they're both kind of crappy in how they're handling things. What do you guys think?
I think, it's like I said, I think Spider-Man is a Marvel character and he should be ran by Marvel. That's my only thought on it. And, that's that.
Alex, do you think Disney or Sony are the bad guys in this?
That's hard to say, man. You put out a good point. I wouldn't really think about the amount of work that Kevin Feige put into this, and he's basically the usher for Peter Parker into the MCU. So, if Disney thinks that his worth is more than what they were getting, they might have a leg to stand on. But like I said when I was doing my comment on it, it's like the only people who are losing right now are the fans. Like the studios don't care; they're going to make money either way. We're the ones who were hoping to see his story continue on in the MCU, and that's not going to happen now because both these people can't share a toy. They're like my kids.
All right, so we got a comment here from Jesse Miller. It says, Matt, you were very knowledgeable about business matters. Can you hit me with what Venom actually produced versus the initial monetary input? So it looks like the Venom film was made for about $100 million. And I believe that it grossed around $800 million at the box office. So if you go by the rule of thumb that movies cost double what they take to make in terms of breaking even, Venom needed to make $200 million to break even. It made around $800 million. So that's $600 million in Sony's pocket there. Did you guys see Venom, by the way, either of you?
I have not yet.
I watched it for the first time last week. I enjoyed it.
I heard mixed reports. Some people said it was great. Some people said it was dumb. I didn't know.
I didn't think it was great, but I had a good time.
Yeah.
If you turn your brain off, it's an enjoyable film.
For me, it was weird seeing Tom Holland actually speak lines because I'm used to him in Mad Max movie where he doesn't have any. So like watching him act is strange.
Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy, you mean?
Yeah, isn't that what I said? Tom Hardy.
No, Tom Holland.
Okay. I'm getting my guys mixed up. You know what I mean.
Toms. Yeah, like I thought Venom was okay. Like it was definitely, it definitely had its issues. There were some pacing issues. There were some plot issues. But overall, it was a fun movie. It was like a movie where like you could just go there, eat your popcorn, and walk out. It's like, yeah, I enjoyed that, and then you forget about it 2 seconds later.
It was a CGI splatter fest. You know, like all these tentpole popcorn movies are these days. So
Thomas Berg says, when is the Disney fatigue setting in? It feels like everyone else is giving up. I don't think there's going to ever be Disney fatigue. I mean, they've been going for how many decades now, and they have so many different types of properties that you don't get bored with them. I mean, Alex, you still like the Pixar movies, right?
Heck yeah, that new one that they just announced, the D23, the Last Dragon, that looks cool. I'm like, that's a cool concept, cool art.
Movie.
It wasn't. It was. Oh, it's just a straight Disney movie.
It's a Disney movie. The next Pixar movie is Soul. It's about jazz.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, Disney has so many different, types of movies that they produce. I don't see anyone getting tired of them anytime soon. And Thomas, you're new here, but thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Let's see here. If you are new here, subscribe to Matt. He's extremely knowledgeable and insightful on many matters. Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that. Venom was okay, but it's a bit uneven. I would agree. I would definitely agree. Let's see here. Matt is a great voice of reason because he's not going to tell you necessarily what you want to hear. He's going to tell you what is what based on business.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'd never tell him what he wants to hear.
No, ever.
I keep hearing all these people say nice things about me, but then I go, oh, they're talking about this guy.
Yeah.
We got drunk.
We're like the Brady Bunch on here. We could be pointing at each other.
Hi, Alex. How you doing? Drunk 3PO's in the chat. Drunk, thank you so much for coming on. Happy birthday, belated birthday. Let's see here. Salty Nerd has time for Matthew's love stream, but not Drunk 3PO.
Oh, God.
We got some jealousy. We got
going on.
I was working yesterday, Jay.
So if Disney bought Sony's movie parts, wouldn't that be reason for breaking up Disney for market dominance? Sorry for my bad spelling. I'm from Sweden. Well, I mean, the first thing is whether or not Sony, the corporation, would want to sell off Sony Pictures, which owns the rights to Spider-Man, to Disney. So if they're not willing to sell, Disney can't buy them. But more than that, if they do sell off to, let's say, a different company or they're acquired by a different company, there's probably a clause in that license that it defaults back to Disney, because if the person who owns Sony isn't the person that they originally licensed the stuff to, there's probably a default to that. So, it's hard to say, but this isn't a simple scenario where Disney can just buy their way out of it. They have to come up with a way to work with Sony unless the license kind of defaults. And once these movie studios have their licenses, they don't want to give them up. Disney literally had to buy Fox to get Fantastic Four and X-Men back. And Fantastic Four was pretty much a dead franchise at Fox, but they were still willing to try to do stuff with it just to hold on to it because, it was one of their only comic book properties there. And then we got Mladen Kulik. I enjoyed Venom, but didn't like the villain. He was just not menacing. Yeah, the villain in Venom was pretty bad. I'm looking forward to Carnage, though. I think Venom 2 might be better than the second one. But at the end of Venom, Alex, if you don't know, we got kind of a tease for the sequel.
In credits.
Yeah, I spoiled. I haven't seen it, but I spoiled it pretty much. I saw all the parts that are important.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for checking out this video. I hope you got a lot out of it. And remember, if you want to support the channel, please check us out on the socials. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Matthew Kadish. You can also find our discussion group over on Facebook at eggfbgroup.com. That's eggfbgroup.com. Takes you right to our Facebook discussion group. And if you'd like to help support the channel, check out my books over on Amazon.com. You can find them by going to kadishbooks.com. That's Kadish books.com. And as always, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new video for more movie, TV, and entertainment news and analysis. This is Matthew Kadish. I'll catch you guys later.